Alrighty. Hello and welcome to Cookie Pocket, an attempt at a podcast. And this is our first holiday special. Woo-hoo!
Yes, welcome back.
Yay.
Yes, we're all very happy to be back, and today we will be discussing Die Hard. Yes, this is a holiday special. Deal with it.
Yes.
Of course, this is starring Bruce Willis and directed by John McTiernan. I can't say I'm acquainted with any of his other work, but perhaps
Predator.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Yeah. I have
Can't you
seen
tell?
Predator, thanks to you two.
Predator is a Christmas movie.
Yes. Newsflash.
Yes, if you want it to be, it certainly is. Right then. Well, happy holidays to our listeners. Hello again, Mitchell and Zach. It's been so long. How are both of you doing? Let's open with that.
I am great. I just went through another semester at film school, and I'm slated to work on a whole bunch of films next semester, so I'm riding high.
Excellent. Good to hear. And
I'm Mitchell. I'm not riding high because I don't do drugs, because
Yes.
drugs are bad.
Yes.
good answer.
Of course.
Good answer. Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. I'm Christian, in case those of you don't already know, and I too am doing fine. Right then. So I would like us to start with our sort of prototypical beginning based off of a lot of what we did for season 1, which is general impressions. I'd like to hear your ratings out of 5, the general reasons behind those ratings, and what did you like, what didn't you like, how did this film make you feel? I'll open the floor to either of you, whoever speaks first.
Okay.
Zach can go first.
Well, all right. I was planning on going first anyway.
Good.
I absolutely love this movie. I think that Die Hard is the greatest action film of all time. I've put that in the reviews I've done of this film, every single one of them, because I've seen it several times. But the previous times that I've seen it, I've more sort of enjoyed it on that emotional level, on that I'm an audience member who's being taken along for the ride level. This time I really tried to kind of break it apart from a cinematic standpoint and from a film technical standpoint, which was a little difficult because I watched this on VHS.
Oh my. Oh dear.
And I started to wonder...
I wish you didn't tell me that.
I started to wonder how I was ever happy with VHS while watching it, but
Yeah.
Even the limited technology did not really sully my experience to any great degree. I think the film's lit incredibly well. John McTiernan, one of the greatest action directors of all time. Bruce Willis is fantastic in the lead. This is an example of a film where pretty much everything goes right, and the minimal things that don't quite go right, they don't matter, because they don't have an impact on your enjoyment of the film. So it's a 5 out of 5 from me.
Awesome.
It's a pretty great review from Zach Garrigus. I also gave it a 5 out of 5. I am not going to jump off the high horse. I don't know what the idiom is, but on the high horse. There we go. Jump on the high horse and say that is the the greatest action film of all time, because I feel like action is probably like the broadest genre ever.
Yeah.
Because there's action in like most films that have ever existed to some capacity, but like. I definitely think if I had to say one was the greatest, this would definitely be at least, like, it's got to be top 5 for sure. I really, like, Bruce Willis, this is definitely, like, a movie that was made for him. You know, I think he really, I've said this so many times, he takes the role and runs with it. Oh. But yeah, I think he did a really good job. I really like his American mannerisms and just everything really... Not only does the film kind of make its own stereotypes, it also like bites off like stereotypes that have already existed from action movies and just makes it its own thing. Like it doesn't just like, you know, like make it a facade like, okay, we're just going to have like this action movie thing, but now it's in a skyscraper and that's the only difference. Now it's like we've all seen this before. But there's so many different curveballs and like so many different things that are so unique to this film that it's so hard to keep up with it, like in terms of how original everything is. And it's just like, it's an experience you really can't look away from. and I really think that, you know, every scene matters for sure. I feel like there's a lot of like I feel like a lot of the plot could have been more developed in some areas, but like Zach said perfectly, like all the little things that bother you and like all like the little plot holes and stuff. I mean, this is like quintessential. None of that matters because all of the action and all of the dialogue is so compelling and so interesting, and Bruce Willis's like the way he moves around and like
Yes.
the way that he says things, and on top of all of the villains moving around their own individual unique ways, you know, you don't feel like they're all cookie cutter. Like every single character is like, even if they're of like the exact same background, are slightly different. And just every scene, even if there's a scene that looks like another scene, or another death that looks like another death, or another gun that looks like another gun, everything is just slightly different every time.
Yeah.
And all those slight differences pile up to have like a really unique and thrilling film. So 5 out of 5.
Yeah, that was a great description overall, I would say. I did choose this film. I think this might be the first time in which the person that chose the film has the lowest of the three. But I want to make it abundantly clear. I love this film, and I have absolutely no problem with any part of it. My rating is a 4.5 out of 5, and that is purely because I reserve my 5 out of 5s for those films that really, really amaze me. I'm like one of those teachers that's teaching an honors class, and they're like, I'm gonna grade you like it's an AP class just because I can to make your life worse.
Yes.
That's how I am with these movies, I guess you could say. So for that reason, this movie that's probably an A+ gets an A- from me. Oh well. Sorry, students that have suffered that scenario.
I did want to. Sorry, I did want to mention. Like, I also went into this thinking, you know, I love this movie, but it's probably going to get a 4 out of 5 this time. But by the time we got to Welcome to the Party, Pal, I was like, oh, never mind, I'm along for the ride. So yeah, it knocked down those boundaries for me, but maybe not for you.
Well, I will say I was stunned when I saw I chose a film that got a 5 out of you, Zach. I was expecting a 5 out of Mitchell, and I was expecting a 4 out of you, for sure. So I was pleasantly surprised to see you gave it a 5. I agree with pretty much everything you guys have said, and I would really say that the Bruce Willis performance is obviously the centerpiece of what makes all of this great. And in this film, he's basically like Ford in Raiders or Kurt Russell in The Thing. It's to me, it's as iconic as pretty much any other performance you could possibly compare it to. It's just great. And I noted this in my Twitter review, even though I can't say as much to the technical side of things, like especially you can, Zach, but I felt the directing was surprisingly smooth, and there were a lot of shots that I was like, oh, this is a lot more interesting than just like showing us what is happening. The camera is moving and characters are put in a certain place. Oh, fancy.
Ooh.
Whereas I guess maybe in an action film you could get away with just putting people somewhere and then shooting them there. It felt at least somewhat more artful than that to me. So I gave it some points for that too. So yeah. And I guess my next question or discussion topic would be, this is not Cookie Pocket's first experience with Bruce Willis, even though it probably should have been. And that's not at all a shot at Hearts War, which all three of us enjoyed, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I wanted to see if I could glean from you guys, how would we compare Bruce in the two films? I think we all agree that he's better in this one. Better in this one. But I want to try to synthesize why Bruce maybe gave us a little more here than he did there, besides the fact that he just got bored with acting or cared less about the role. I don't know.
It is hard to say, because it's one of those great, like, actor tragedies of modern cinema at this point, at least amongst people who are really into action films or have seen a lot of Bruce Willis films, is kind of the downfall of Bruce Willis. Because in this, which is kind of his breakout role, I mean, he was in a show called Moonlighting before this, but that was mostly comedic, and he was mostly known as a comedic actor. And in this, he's just on fire. Like, he's like just a ball of totally magnetic charisma and energy in this movie. And I would like he's one of the coolest action heroes of the 80s. And without being this muscle-bound like Adonis that somebody like Sylvester Stallone or somebody like Arnold Schwarzenegger Arnold would aim for being. And then over time, like it seems like he's sort of lost his passion for acting. But outside of that, I think he's better in this than he is in Hearts War, partially because of the script. And I think that the script brings maybe a little more of his comedy experience into it. You can compare action choreography in a lot of ways to sort of physical comedy and slapstick, and there's a lot of different timing and precision involved in both, a perfect punch and a perfect pratfall. And then additionally, I think that just his face in this is so much more compelling than it is in Hearts War. And I know this sounds like we're going into Kirk Douglas territory here, but I'm not criticizing his face. Like, it's not annoying to look at in Hearts War. It's just he's got so much more expressiveness and desperation and thought on his face in every moment of this movie than he does in Hearts War, where the role kind of demands that he be a little more reserved and cut off, and as a result, maybe a little more boring.
Yeah, that's fair. And I want to apologize to Mitchell. I didn't want to frame this as a dunking on Hearts War session, because I did
No,
enjoy
I
that
hate
film.
you. We're not going to play anymore. I'm telling the teacher on you.
That's fair. I deserve detention after this one.
Hearts War is not carried by Bruce Willis, okay?
That is true.
Yes.
By any means.
It's a definitively different film. I probably, for the sake of our audience, I did frame that as a what about Hearts War question, but in reality, I did want it to be more of a downfall of Bruce Willis thing, and I think Zach, you summed that up pretty well. But at least we have this sort of magnum opus of his to enjoy.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to ask you two next about the technical side of things, because as a criticism podcast, so to speak,
yes.
I guess we should delve into that to some extent, besides just harping on Willis's awesomeness as much as we can. And I don't really have much in the way of understanding what to call a certain type of shot, or what does tracking mean, or any of that stuff. I just
You
know.
sounded like George Lucas right there.
For a second, yeah.
Yes, and I'll have a salad on the side for you. Okay, we're not getting into that. I can just tell when a shot looks different, I'll say, oh, that looks cool, and that's kind of the extent of my analysis. And I'll pipe up about the score a little bit. And in this case, I do think the score is used sparingly but effectively, but maybe that's another thing. I wanted to invite both of you to share technical observations that you enjoyed, be that directing, be that anything, and a set, whatever you want to talk about technically. What stuck out to you?
I think they had a lot, or not a lot, to work with in terms of the setting and just how dull and ordinary everything looks, and just having things automatically. Michael Bay realized this probably when he was born, that if things explode and there's gunshots and yelling, then things are interesting. So on top of that, though, like Christian said, the cinematography, it's a very subtle thing. It's not like Sam Raimi, where you notice almost instantly that there's something go amiss here. Okay, why is the camera sideways? But in this, it fits the mood. When he's in a tight space. Obviously, literally everybody knows the vent camera angle. When you're like close to him, he's in a confined space. When like just the area of focus, like when anybody's walking towards somewhere, they're always showing where they're walking, and I always feel like there's something happening. Every scene has a moving person, albeit either it could be a moving object, but there's always something happening with the plot happening in the scene. Like there's always a piece of dialogue, and there's always like the subtle score and everything. And just everything is just so well mixed together and really integrated. And it's something you don't really notice until you think back on it. But overall, I mean, like I said, I think the acting was pretty darn good. Cerberus Snape,
yes,
but German, did a great job. Just the accents for them and everything was really was a lot more compelling than you would think. The yelling and different. It reminds me a lot of James Bond, but it's not James Bond.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think the cinematography is definitely the biggest thing. I think the sounds are nothing like super crazy good, but I think mixing the sound along with the dialogue that was fine. Yeah, I think cinematography biggest thing.
Yeah, I really want to sing the praises of the cinematography in this as well. The cinematographer is Jan de Bont, who actually went on to become a pretty well-known director in his own right. He directed Speed and Twister, and some other well-known action and kind of disaster movies. But the cinematography in this, I recognized, now that I've kind of taken some classes on lighting, there's a lot of like really crisp shadows in this film. And the way they've done that is that they've taken their standard three-piece lighting setup, and they've just taken out their fill light. So a lot of the times you'll have characters who one side of their face is in shadow, or they'll have really heavy shadows under their eye, and it really helps, or the lighting's coming in directly from the side, and it really helps to emphasize kind of this tension. Score also, Christian, you mentioned the score being kind of reserved, but doing what it has to do. Mm-hmm. I hadn't recognized until this viewing. I think everybody who's watched this film remembers the scene where Ode to Joy plays when the villains break into the vault. But I hadn't recognized until this viewing that little motifs from Ode to Joy are worked into the villain's theme from like the very first time they're revealed on screen. So you get kind of that little foreshadowing, and it becomes almost like the theme of the villains throughout the movie. And again, the angles and whatnot, they do so much in this movie to make what would in reality be kind of a boring office complex feel like this just maze of like trip falls and dangers, and oh my gosh, there's broken glass over there, and there's like a vent over here, and I'm gonna fall down the elevator shaft, and this place is a death trap. Like they make this office building feel like the opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark or something. It feels like just this maze where you could die at any turn.
Yeah, it's incredible. I didn't even notice the way I didn't notice that they had recycled the motives from Ode to Joy, but that's a great note, and I think that could almost interestingly factor into the discussion of, obviously they're villains, but
yes.
There's this whole discourse about like, are they terrorists, aren't they terrorists during the film, which I think is, interesting from a classification perspective. Obviously we're not debating whether they're good guys or not, because they're not, but still an interesting thought. And as far as the technical stuff goes, I think you guys covered it for me. It just looked good and sounded good to me. So yeah. Next up, I wanted to ask you guys about casting and similarly acting. We've already established that Bruce Willis is great. Alan Rickman, may he rest in peace, was fantastic in this. And I think a lot of the sort of bit characters and supporting roles are also really perfectly cast, and surprisingly, there's a surprisingly diverse cast in this film too, for an 80s film, I would say. And I don't know, do you guys have anything to say about the other actors, or is there anything to be said about how this film is cast, or how that might factor into overall how convincing and entertaining it is?
Reggie Johnson. One of the best cops I've ever seen in my life.
In everything. In Ghostbusters and Family Matters and Die Hard.
Yep. And I think it's Bonnie Bedelia.
Yeah, I think
Is that
so.
her name?
Yeah.
She did pretty good. I think, I was thinking maybe she could have been given more lines, but then I was thinking, wait, I think she's already like used her purpose. So I don't think the director intended her to be like super involved. Like I guess if they did this like in a more modern age, they would have had her be like more resistant and stuff, instead of just being a damsel in distress, which is using my feminist lens from English class.
Bravo.
But yeah, no, I think she did a really good job acting. I think she she had like a rocky relationship with McClane earlier on, and that kind of showed through, and then that it really wrapped into the main plot like absurdly well. Like it's kind of disgusting how well that worked.
Yeah.
But yeah, Vel Johnson, I think he had some really good lines. He had his own character development, which isn't even a requirement.
Right, yeah.
But like he's literally not even involved in the story until the last third act or whatever the film talk is called. But yeah, I think he was I think his whole thing was really cool, and I think that ending was turned out a lot better than Paul Blart Mall Cop ever could have with
Yes.
The SWAT officer being like, "I'm the bad guy now." But yeah, I think he was really cool. I think he had some really well written lines between him and McClane, and him just being instantly trusting with him, because they probably have a similar occupation. So
Yeah.
I just thought that whole understanding bit, they didn't even need to include that, but it just added more substance. Just improves the substance of an action movie. So
Yeah.
welcome.
Absolutely. I was gonna say, Mitchell, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the little arcs that all the characters in this film have, and I think that Holly is pretty well incorporated in this film. Certainly much better than she is in Die Hard 2, where she's pretty much just in a plane for the entire movie and not really part of the plot at all. But the terrorist in this film, or the terrorist in quotes, because it's wishy-washy on whether or not they're technically terrorists, each one of them in the performance and in the scripting kind of has their individual character, and you sort of see on their faces they're individual people. There's Han's brother early on who dies early on, but he gives off kind of this sort of nerdy, meek feel. I mean, he's in this group, he's able to bear a gun and defend himself, but you sort of get the feeling that maybe he's just doing this because his brother is. I mean, a lot of that's interpretive, you read that out of it, but you're able to read that out of the performance. Mm-hmm. There's Marco, who, just the decisions of the actors to do things in certain ways. When Marco's on the table and shooting through it at Bruce Willis, I love the way that actor says, "No more table, what you gonna do now?" I love that. It's got so much, individual flair to it. Yeah. I really do like the performances of everybody, extra or lead, in this film. But this might be a good place for me to talk about who originally would have starred in this movie. And that's Frank Sinatra.
Oh my goodness.
Because this movie is based on a book called Nothing Lasts Forever, which was written by Roderick Thorpe as a sequel to his book The Detective. And The Detective was adapted into a movie starring Frank Sinatra. And there was a contractual obligation that if they ever made a movie based on the sequel to the book, they had to ask him if he wanted to be in it. So we very well could have gotten Die Hard with Frank Sinatra in his 60s or 70s trying to wriggle through these vents. I think it's just funny to think about that and how much better a casting decision it was to have Bruce Willis come in when Frank Sinatra said, "Nah, I'm not interested."
Yeah.
It's like he comes out of the building at the very end and he's like, "I've got you under my skin."
Oh, man. Yes,
and then it just works in. He sings all the Christmas songs.
He would defeat Hans with song, yes.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I don't even know how to continue from that point. Wow.
I'll have it my bang, bang, way, bang, bang.
Every discussion over the radio is just another snippet of one of his songs. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Oh no.
Well, I wanted to discuss the nature of the plot of this film next, especially because I guess you could classify it as one of those closed room thrillers type thing where Bruce Willis is basically trapped in the building and he tries but mostly fails to get outside help. And when the outside help does arrive, they're pretty much incompetent and it's still him doing all the work. Anyway, I guess we did just sort of touch on the funny bit of the novel, but I do think with a sort of a closed room type thing, it's very easy to draw your way to a conclusion when you're writing something like this, because there's a particularly fixed set of outcomes, or at least in terms of the cause and effect of what can happen. Like, for example, if somebody dies in the room, then everybody else is more at risk. There aren't a lot of ways in which you can deviate from the formula outside of killing a different person or another person falling into a different sort of trouble. And I did think that the way this film sort of unravels is kind of genius. I was at maybe hour 15-ish. I'm not sure exactly where in the film. A little past halfway when Bruce Willis's character John McClane first encounters Hans Gruber, and he pretends that he's an escaped employee. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is one of those great scenes. I bet you we're close to being over, and I check, and there's 56 minutes left. And I'm like, holy cow! It's one of those, and I very rarely can say this for a film where it feels like it goes on for a lot longer than it actually does, yet it also goes by really quickly. I know that's a total contradiction.
Yes.
But I feel like a lot happens. And the movie's just over 2 hours. It's not some gargantuan 2.5, 3 hour thing. And a lot happens in a condensed period of time, but it's not particularly confusing for anyone watching. And it's entertaining pretty much the entire time. At least it was for me. So I wanted to ask you guys, how did you feel about the way the plot unraveled and the events that followed? And how much of that factors into your enjoyment or critical appraisal of the film?
I think this is one of the most, like you said, it's one of the most ingenious bottle movies ever written. And you can call it closed door, you can call it a bottle film. The basic idea is the whole thing takes place in one space. A closed bottle film, yes, a corked
Trademark
film.
that.
But I think that it's sort of a testament to how well this is written, that all the Die Hard sequels have kind of struggled with this format and ultimately rejected it. Every Die Hard sequel is kind of well known for being like, well, we've got to do it in a bigger place because we can't do it in a small... So we go from Die Hard in a building to Die Hard in an airport to Die Hard in New York to Die Hard in America to Die Hard in Russia. Like, it just keeps getting bigger because they don't know how to put it back in that bottle in the way that this movie does. I think this movie does fantastically at taking us to different places in the bottle. I mean, it's not quite like, say, No Exit or something like that, where we're stuck in a tiny living room. Like, it's not quite that small of a location. So we can go to different offices, we can go to different places in the building, and that provides some variety. But at the same time, and we also get to see what's happening outside the building as well, which adds some additional tension, because we've got this whole situation where the police and the FBI are trying to figure out what's happening, and the FBI are kind of making things worse by trying to make things better, and there's some additional tension there. So I do think this movie does a great job of working kind of inside and outside of the bottle movie format simultaneously to present something really entertaining and, at the time at least, really unique that I don't think any other movie has quite managed to replicate.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Or you could just make a second bottle and just call it Jakku. But
you could.
But anyway, so there's different... I think there's totally different settings. Really, the more isolated the setting, the more that has to be going on in that isolated area. This is my big brain philosophical take. So if there's like a closet, there has to be like 10 minutes of heavily carried by dialogue of just like two people romancing or bonding or something, whatever people do in closets, choosing a different shirt or something. It has to be integral to the story. So I think that's pretty much what they did. I mean, like, and they made a skyscraper look a lot more diverse. They took an ordinary thing and made it super duper diverse in different ways. Like, different rooms are entirely different settings. And it's like Alien, and like is my first thing I think of, because Alien is on a freaking ship, and like you would expect the whole ship, for functionality's sake, just to look more or less the same throughout. But like there's always like the tiny little things, like the bird thing that sips the water or whatever. Like that's like everybody remembers that, and that's all it is. It's just like it's like an aesthetic, prop, and like it's stuff like that. It's so involved in the atmosphere. Like they have so many different areas. They have the lobby, they have the elevator, they have the stairs, they have the construction area, they have the roof, they have the outside. They have like so many different places. They have like occasionally other places outside of the building, but not really. They have inside the limo with the teddy bear, like
and Argyle,
Argyle.
The garage. So like there's literally so many different places in this movie, and the only way that it would work is if the dialogue was really compelling and if there was actually, really good action, that was not just, just the cinematography and the dialogue alone carry like 80% of this movie, not even mentioning Bruce Willis. So I think it's just, I don't know, it's like a one-time thing, like Zach said. I mean, I can't really see how they could replicate this ever again. I mean, unless they just found like, I don't know, a space planet more interesting than it actually is, like a swamp or something. But I don't know. I don't know how they could do that.
Yes, we had to find another way to tie it into that other
Yeah, just to offend
other
Christian.
topic that we're not actually going to mention, but all of us actually know what it is anyway. All right. That was a great point, though, Mitchell, about the sort of smaller details that really key you in. And I think the two that stick out to me most is one, there's sort of that throwaway line where they're like, oh, this building is beautiful. Oh, yeah, it would be beautiful if we ever finished building it. Yuck, yuck, yuck.
Yes.
But then because of that
Yeah.
one throwaway line, there's actually a bunch of extra floors that aren't totally completed that give us a much more interesting setting than just another completed office floor. And
Yeah.
the other sort of throwaway line that turns into a justifiable point for making it more interesting is when at the beginning when he's on the plane and the dude's like, oh, take off your shoes and your socks and you roll up your toes and you walk on the carpet and then
Yep.
you're gonna feel great. And then because of that, poor McLean gets glass all over his feet and it's nasty, but it's iconic.
Yes.
And it adds a little something
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So that's kind of genius to make those empty moments actually work towards something bigger in terms of building up conflict or interest or just another detail to make you feel interested or invested one way or another.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the fact that McLean is barefooted makes him vulnerable. I think that's a really important thing.
Right.
One of the big aspects of this movie that really works is that McLean feels like a regular guy. Like he looks like your dad. Like he doesn't look like Arnold Schwarzenegger or anything like that. He's not like this guy who's going to plow through the terrorists and come out the other side looking more muscular than he did coming in. At the end of this movie, he is beaten up. His feet are like cut to shreds. He looks like he went through a lawnmower. And that kind of him working through all that injury and clearly being tired and beaten up past the point where somebody would normally keep doing this means that you're rooting for him, like you're rooting for Rocky in the final rounds of that film when he's beaten to a pulp but still going.
Yeah.
Well said. My last section, so to speak, is closing comments. We've already divulged our ratings, but this is sort of a last opportunity for you guys to mention anything that stuck out to you or is worth mentioning before we get on to the real closure of today's episode. So any closing comments?
Hearts War is fine.
It is fine. It is fine.
is.
And I'm sorry if I indicated otherwise. It is a fine film, and I recommend to all our listeners to go back and listen to Hearts War and all of our other Season 1 episodes.
Yes.
But they realized when they casted Bruce Willis that they can't have him stand still and talk for more than 2 minutes or something will go wrong. Otherwise, he's just going to talk like this. You Nazi piece of crap, I'm going to kill you. Don't you understand? I'm the captain of this ship. We're going to get out of here. And now I'm already bored. But if he's just like,
Yes.
Yippee-ki-yay, and he goes, that's cool.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. So there's my summary.
Yeah. I think I kind of summed up what I think of this movie in my opening thoughts, but I did want to mention, we've talked about dialogue. I do think the dialogue in this movie is a very unique combination of kind of modern 80s action dialogue with sort of harder core detective dialogue, which probably comes from the fact that it's based on that novel, which is a sequel to a very well-known detective novel. But there's bits in this where we've got, our action lines. We've got, welcome to the party, pal, of course, those kind of action one-liners. And then there's bits of this where we get lines that feel like they came out of like a Humphrey Bogart film. One that really stood out to me is at the beginning of the movie. Bruce Willis gets out of the car. He's been driven there to the skyscraper by Argyle. He gets out of the car, gets out of the limo. He looks up at the building. Argyle says, "You got a place to stay?" And he says, "I'll find a place," and then lights a cigarette. And if you made that black and white, it could have come like right out of like The Big Sleep or something.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that sort of hard Scrabble combination with witty action lines makes this a really, really interesting and fun film to listen to as well as watch.
Yeah, for sure.
Fun for everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, well said. Anyone that can comfortably sustain a couple F-bombs here and there, I think this is a entirely enjoyable film that even people that aren't super into action films, like I know for certain that isn't necessarily your main genre, Zach. I don't know if it is or is not mine, but I think pretty much anyone that can appreciate a solid gunfight and an attractive lead in more ways than one will find this film enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier on in this episode, I made a joke where I compared myself to that annoying teacher that graded an honor student like they were an AP student unfairly. And now I'm going to do another one of those annoying teacher moments where I ask you a question that doesn't have a concrete answer, but is meant to draw out different opinions to just make you talk in a circle until you sound intelligent, even though the real answer is, teacher, there is no answer. You're just trying to get us to talk. So with that being said, my question is this a Christmas movie? Why or why not?
Okay. I was actually having this discussion with my mother earlier today. I don't necessarily think that when they were making this movie, they thought... I don't think anybody at 20th Century Fox financed this movie. I don't think anybody at 20th Century Fox said, all right, we need a Christmas movie. What's this script? Die Hard? All right, that'll be our Christmas movie.
You're wrong. Twitter canceled.
I don't think that was at all the case. I think they needed an action movie, and this one happened to be set at Christmas. Mm-hmm. And it came out in July. Like, I don't think this was meant to be a Christmas movie. But if you watch a movie at Christmas, and if a movie is a Christmas tradition for you, then I would say it's a Christmas movie. There are movies like Batman Returns, Eyes Wide Shut. Those are set at Christmas, and I like to watch them around
Batman
Christmas.
Returns.
But
it's more of a Christmas movie than a movie.
Those are not Christmas movies. They're action movies. They're a Kubrick movie, because I don't really know how I would even define Eyes Wide Shut. Maybe a drama or a thriller. I don't know. I'm getting off track. But if you watch a movie around Christmas and it's a tradition for you, then it's a Christmas movie. You know, I mean, most of It's a Wonderful Life isn't set at Christmas, and the movie came out in the summer. And yet that's a Christmas movie because people like to watch it around Christmas, and there's some Christmassy stuff in it. So, you know, if it's the same case for Die Hard for you, then go ahead. It's a Christmas movie.
Mm-hmm. It's like asking if you like apple pie. Well, first you have to define what apple pie is. Is it a pie made out of apples? Is it just a pie with apples on top of it? Because it could be. Because an apple pie could be like a pie... But or it's shaped like an apple. A cherry pie shaped like an apple is an apple pie. It's shaped like an apple, right? So a Christmas movie can be however you want to define Christmas. Let's define Christmas, okay? So Christmas is when Christ was born, all right? Now, what does that have to do with Die Hard? Let's figure out this butterfly effect, okay? How the birth of Jesus Christ led to the creation of Die Hard. But no, I think, it takes place during Christmas Eve, right? So it has Christmas themes in it. It has Christmas songs in it. It has references to Christmas in it. Is it about Christmas? No. Is it snowing? Well, I guess towards the end, apparently in LA. But I mean, I don't know. I think it's just a meme, honestly. I think it's just
yeah.
It's honestly it's not supposed to be taken like a moral, like you're supposed to get morals out of it, okay? So just by that very fact, it's not really a Christmas story movie, if that makes any sense. Like, it's not really like, obviously it's like, so he's a dad trying to get home to his kids. Oh, well, you can just throw that in there. But we've seen so many non-Christmas movies do the same thing. So really, it just depends on how you define Christmas. So I'm going to always remain neutral so I don't get in trouble with anybody. But if I had to say, I would say it's not a Christmas movie. I would be pretty much in the same line of thinking as Zach. I think it's, like I said, if it has enough Christmas themed things in it where you can watch it during Christmas and not be ashamed of yourself or get bricks thrown through your window by your neighbors. But otherwise, I think you're chilling.
Yes. That went swimmingly. That went much better than I expected. I think I trapped you into my teacher-esque query well there. Alrighty. That is all I have for you guys. And I agree with everything you said. It's a Christmas movie if you want it to be, but I want it to be, and it's a holiday special, so today it is. Hey. All right.
Okay.
We've got one more section, and for our loyal viewers, you'll be anticipating this. It is time for another edition of The Rundown. Holiday themed. Okay. So,
yes.
For those that aren't acquainted, I'm sure all of you are by now, but anyway, we've got 60 seconds to spew a bunch of random subjects and lines and locations and what have you from the movie we've just discussed at Zach. And Zach will respond with a gut rating out of 5 as quickly as he can. And Mitchell and I are just going to take turns badgering you. And Mitchell, are you ready to start?
Yeah.
Alrighty. In 3,
It's been a while since I did this. All right.
2, 1, go.
Ventilation shafts.
2 out of 5.
Making fists with your toes.
4 out of 5.
Bruce Willis actually trying.
4 out of 5.
Argyle the limo driver.
4 out of 5.
Terrorists saying they are not terrorists.
3 out of 5.
Freaking California.
3 out of 5.
Alan Rickman as Hans Gruber.
4 out of 5.
Yippee-ki-yay.
3 out of 5.
Snape learning how to use firearms.
3 out of 5.
Ordering a pizza over a private channel.
3 out of 5.
Fashionable European mercenaries.
3 out of 5.
Glass.
4 out of 5.
Now I have a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho.
4 out of 5.
Buying convenience store sweets for your pregnant wife.
2 out of 5.
The Plaza's Apple iDirectory.
3 out of 5.
Roy Rogers.
3 out of 5.
McLean not dying from tetanus.
3 out of 5.
Turning a cop car into Swiss cheese.
4 out of 5.
Miss Gennaro.
3 out of 5.
That time? Okay. Phew. We got through most of them. That was a fun one.
All right.
Right then. All right. I will invite either one of you, whoever's hosting next. I'm sorry, I've forgotten, but give us a preview, whoever is.
Yeah, I think it's me. So I will go, I guess that now I'm previewing, it will be me.
It is.
But
Yep,
next
you're doing it
time,
now.
on our next holiday special, we are going to be changing genres and sort of going back to Weirdsville, my favorite town in America, because we are going to be talking about Black Christmas from 1974, the original, which is a classic Christmas horror film. It's known as one of the very first slasher movies. It's directed by Bob Clark, director of A Christmas Story, amongst other movies. And I think that this is a genuinely really frightening movie. It always gets me on every single watch, and I'm really interested to hear what you guys have thought of it. So next time, if you want to hear us talk about Black Christmas, the original, not either of the remakes, tune in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you love horror like Zach or expect to feel as uncomfortable as I do, feel free to tune into that. All right, then. This has been Cookie Pocket, an attempt at a podcast. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you are here to listen to us next time.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.